Welcome. In this demonstration, we will do simple drawing. So what we will do is to draw some fence over here, and then we will have some trees against it, and then we will draw some wild flowers at the base of the tree. So this will be essentially, in most of the drawings that we have done, we have seen so far, they have been a long distance drawing in a sense that we are covering a lot of ground. But over here, we will, focus on the fence against which we will have some tree trunks. So let's start by laying down our line. So this is the line against which we will have the fence, so I put it down lightly over here, and the first thing will be to define our fence. So what I do is, again, I just draw a nice simple fence like this. So now we are not doing those flat fence, but what we're doing is just to draw the fence as this kind of wooden posts, and we will also add a texture to indicate that these are kind of old wooden posts, so in use as a fence. So that's what I'm doing. So I will have three such wooden posts over here as a fence. So I just did that outline, and what I will do next is to essentially draw the tree trunks, and the tree trunks will be closer to the viewer. So essentially we will draw the trunks over here. So I start my trunk from inside the line closer to the viewer, and then I draw a simple trunk like this over here. So one trunk over here, and then I can draw a second trunk over here as well like this. And I will just make the second trunk a bit bigger and make it also closer. So essentially, this trunk is closer to the viewer, so it's bigger. So there we have it. So this will be this simple drawing, and what we will do is to quickly texture the wooden post, the fence, and then also texture the bark of these trunks, and then add some ground flowers to give a nice feel to the ground cover. To texture the wooden post, the simplest stroke to use are these angular intersecting lines, and we have seen these lines used for the bark texture in other demonstrations, and that's certainly the case. So these intersecting lines can be used to give a texture for bark, a roughness to the surface, which kind of gives a feel for bark. So what we will do is to show these wooden posts as essentially having that bark texture as well. So that's what I do. I go ahead and just add these intersecting lines to these wooden posts over here, and they start to acquire that bark texture, that feel. So these are kind of old log of woods that were used as fence. So that's what I just did. So that's how easy it is to essentially show a weathered wooden post. You simply use these intersecting lines to give it that feel of for old weathered wood. And I'll do the same for the other two weathered wooden posts as well. So I go ahead and add these intersecting lines over here as well, and I'll do the same to the third wooden post as well. And the other thing that we have seen in other demonstrations is that to bring out the roundness, we need to darken one end more than the other. So essentially, we do the same for the trunk, and we'll do the same for these wooden posts. So what I will do is to add more of these angular lines to one end over here to kind of give it a feel of roundness. So as I darken one end and leave the other a bit lighter, now we get a feel for the roundness of this post. And I'll do the same for the third post over here as well. So I simply use the same angular lines to darken one end and get a feel for the roundness of the post. So essentially, we have the initial texture defined for the wooden post. There's some other things that we can do to make them more believable and add interest to these wooden posts. The simplest thing to do is to essentially make the edges a bit jagged and overlapping. So essentially, we draw the initial outline like this, but to make this edge more interesting, we can have these overlapping edges like this. These overlaps make the edges more interesting. So that's what we will do over here, is to just make the edges like this. So now they acquire a bit more interest, and essentially this dark it indicates that there is some crevice, or there is some other kind of imperfectness in the wood from age, and that adds interest. So that's what I've done over here, and I'll do the same on this other edge as well, right? So I'll just add some kind of jagged darkness to add interest to that post. So same over here. So I am adding this kind of jagged darkness to the edge, and to the other lighter side I'm adding a bit kind of unevenness to the edge. So essentially, again, to add the unevenness, so this is a straight line, and to add unevenness, make this, introduce these kind of overlaps at the edges, and they indicate some kind of imperfectness in the wood. So there, I've done that, and I'll do the same for my third wooden post over here as well. So there we have it. And one last thing that you can do to indicate this wood as a bit more weathered, a bit more kind of done with age, is to add a kind of darkness, tapered crevices to the top. So this is the stroke that you use. Essentially, it's a tapered darkness, and you can add this to the top to indicate these kind of crevices in the wood, so that they always add interest to. So that's what I will do, is I'll simply add this kind of a bit of tapered crevices to the top over here. And as you can see, these tapered crevices give a feel for the age of the wood, right? So what we're doing is to show kind of the age of this wooden post over here, and by adding this kind of crevices, it indicates that. So I will add those crevices to the top like this, and if you want, you can also add them to the body a bit. So here, so I add a bit to the body, a bit to the top. Now these, posts are looking kind of, weathered, beaten down, the feel that we want. There we have it. So I added some of these, crevices to the top as well. So there we have it. This weathered wooden post we just drew will act as our fence. And next we will texture the bark of these trees. So essentially, we can use the same angular crossing lines to texture the bark, but since we have used that for these wooden posts, I will use a different texture for a different stroke for the tree trunks, and that is these wiggly lines. So essentially, these are horizontal and vertical kind of intersecting wiggly lines, and when they intersect, they give a feel for the bark texture over here. So this is the stroke that I will use for these two trunks over here. So I start by drawing these wiggly lines over here, and I essentially create a first layer over all of the trunk, and then I will again darken one end to bring out the roundness. So these are simple. So as you can see, this line, wiggly line, essentially indicates a kind of fissure in the bark, that kind of thing, right? So when you add them as vertical and horizontal wiggly lines, they give a feel for the bark in there. So that's what I've done over here. So there you have it. By using the simple wiggly lines, you can create a simple bark texture for the trunk. And I will now go ahead and darken one end more than the other to bring out the form or the roundness of the trunk. So I will use the same line. So always use this more of that same stroke to add more texture. So do not start doing this, because then it will destroy that kind of bark texture that stroke provides. So I'll just simply use more of those wiggly lines and add a bit more of them at one end. So there we have it. This is how we quickly created the bark texture for this trunk. And in the end, I will again add a bit of these jagged edges to the trunk as well, like we did for the post, to make it more interesting. So here I just add some bit of dark here, and the same I will do for the other end to bring out the roughness of the edges. There we have it. So this is how quickly I just put down the texture for this trunk, and I will do the same for this trunk as well. So I'll use these wiggly lines over here and start to use them to put down the texture of bark for this trunk. So again, these are just put them in any kind of random order, but make them wiggly, right? So we are not doing this kind of letters. So this is not what we are doing, but we have to make them, like in this wiggly manner. So that's what I do over here. And I have one layer done almost. And then what I will do is to darken the one end like I did for the other trunk to bring out its roundness. So I will go ahead and add more of the same wiggly lines in one corner, in one edge, to make it dark and this is the change of tone from dark to light, that gives an appearance of roundness. And then over here, these small lines, they give a feeling for bark texture in the trunk. So these lines, they provide us both with the curvature and also with the feel of bark texture. So there we have it, right? So, and then finally I will add a bit of jagged darkness like we did for the trunks and the wooden post to give it a bit more believable feel. So I just add a bit of that jagged darkness over here as well to the edges. So there we have it. We quickly drew the 3 wooden posts, and then we added 2 trunks. And what we can do actually is to extend these trunks so that they are a bit above the wooden posts, because you always have to keep the relative size in mind. So over here in our drawing, these are thick wooden posts, but they will not be as high as the trunk. So what I will do is just simply extend the trunks a bit more so that they stand above those wooden posts over here. So I use those same wiggly lines to kind of extend the height of these 2 trunks. So there we have it. So what I will do next is to essentially do the ground cover and ground the trunks and create some flowers at the base of these trunks, and also same for these wooden posts as well. So essentially, to ground to define the ground, what we do is we use these horizontal lines. So these lines, they define the ground form, and I increase the size of these lines towards the viewer to give it a feel of distance. So as when you see this way and you see the size reducing, you get a feel for the distance, because in perspective things, they reduce in size with the distance. But because these 3 are all at the same distance, they are the same size. But over here, this tree that is closer is a bit bigger than the this trunk that is a bit further out, because it's closer to this line, so it's a bit smaller. So you always have to keep that in mind and draw the sizes of the elements in your drawing in relation to their position and how far they are out in the distance. So I just drew this simple ground line, and what I will do next is to cover this with grass and then finally add some wildflowers. To add grass, simply use this small angular lines. So essentially this is the line that we use for the grass. So these are small curved lines like this. And for the distant grass, the one that is a bit further out, we use this, we use small stroke, these small lines. And as we get closer to the viewer, we increase the size of the stroke to indicate, bigger size for the grass. So what I will do in the beginning is to add this grass in a small grass to these at the base of this wooden post. And again, I won't use too small a stroke because these posts are not too far out in distance, right? So we don't want, these are not in too far out because the size is relatively bigger. So I will not use too small a stroke, but something like this, is size like this. So I will use that and ground these wooden fence or posts for our drawing here. So essentially, to ground a post or a trunk to the ground, the simplest thing to do is to add a bit of darkness at the point of their contact with the ground here. So by adding a bit of darkness, now this wooden post appears in a bit grounded. So I will do the same for the other wooden posts as well. So simply, add this grass stroke over here and darken the base of this post, and this makes it feel grounded. And then what I will do is also to draw the grass on the rest of the ground like this to give it a bit of grass covered appearance. So there you have it. So essentially what I'm doing is simply creating these lumps of grass like this. This lump of grass gives a feel of grass covered ground. I'm not literally covering the whole ground with grass, but by simply adding a bit of grass, a bit of grass clump here, a bit there, the ground starts to get a feel as being grass covered. So that's what I do. I simply create this small lumps of grass using that grass stroke, and as you can see, I've used a bigger stroke as I go towards the viewer. So essentially, when you look at this drawing, you feel that the grass stroke is getting smaller, so that gives you an indication of, of a bit of distance in your drawing. So I use a bit of grass over here as well, and then I will do the same over here and add more grass clumps to kind of cover the ground with this grass. So just keep moving your hand in random, and add a bit of grass here, add a bit of grass here, and soon you start to feel that the ground is grass covered. So there we have it. And what we will next do is to ground these trunks and use some wildflowers around its base to add more interest to the drawing. To draw a ground flower, you simply draw a stem like this, then draw a circle or an ellipse, half ellipse, and then just a bit of darkness to the top to give it a shape of a flower. And then you ground the stem by using this wiggly line. And if you want, you can add a bit of small leaf, or just add a swirl to indicate that there is some kind of foliage on the stem. So this is how easy it is to essentially draw a wildflower, and that's what we will use in this demonstration. So I'll simply draw a line and then a flower and ground it like this. So I simply drew a stem, drew a flower, and grounded it like this, And as I start to add more of it, it will start to get the feel of the ground is covered with this wildflower. So there, by adding few of these, you already get the feel. So I add few more over here, and always remember to ground those stems. So now our base of this tree is looking like a bit grounded with the flowers, and I will add a bit more. The thing is, we need to have the base of the tree darkened a bit, right? So I need to draw a bit more flowers till the ground requires a bit of darkness over there. Then I'll add a bit more around it. So simply add more flowers, and as you add more, and again don't add them in any order. Essentially, you just want to move your hand and have a feel. So draw some bottom here like this, and then add a bit more here, draw a bit bigger over here like this. So just by adding these flowers in a bit of random manner in this, and using the simple stroke, stem, flower, and then grounding, we are able to give a nice feel of this ground near the base as covered with the wildflowers. And here this stem is not grounded, so it looks a bit odd. So I just draw a wiggly line over here at the base, and that grounds the stem, and then makes it much more believable. So over here I'm again just simply using these wiggly lines to ground my flowers. So there we have it. This is how simply you can draw wildflowers. And if you want, we can even draw some wildflowers near the base of the this wooden post as well. So here, since they are a bit far out in distance, I will draw a bit small size for the flower. So you always need to keep that perspective in mind, and as we go out, draw the same things a bit smaller, so we can reinforce the feeling of distance. And I can even add a few more over here as well. And over here I can add a few small flowers as well. So now we are getting a nice backdrop. And don't keep the same height, you can vary the height a bit, don't make it too big because they are in distance, but again you can vary the height a bit. So I'll just simply add a few more flowers over here. So this will give us a nice backdrop of the ground covered with the wildflowers over here near the base of the wooden post, and also this tree trunk over here. So I'll draw some more wildflowers over here, and a bit more over here. And you can draw wildflowers over here if you want, but since the wooden post is already shaded dark, that the flowers will kind of blend into it. So I don't do that over here, but simply draw around it. So what happens is that when you draw flowers around it, it also gives a feel of the flowers as somewhere in this vicinity as well. So I do some more flowers over here. So now it's looking nice. And other thing to always do is to darken the base a bit more than the top. So over here I have some bit of white for my wooden post at the base, and darken it. So when the wooden post or the tree trunk goes into the ground, darken the base a bit to give it solidity. So I do that, and there we have it, right? So now we have these wooden posts that look like weathered wooden posts, which are in a way fence in our drawing, and then we have some tree trunks behind them. What I will do is to simply also to indicate that this is a fence. I can simply add a wire. So I just use this kind of jagged, not this kind of wire. So I'm not using a straight, but just like something like this, and then I will add one more over here. So now this is giving it a bit more appearance of a fence. And what I can do is to also use this to essentially introduce more the notion of that this is a fence, so this is that kind of wire, which has these things to stop the intruders, I guess. So I will add this a bit over here, and so essentially this is very simple, like some kind of a small star. So now this is giving a bit more appearance of a fence. And I will just again simply add a bit more grass here, and I will finally ground this trunk and draw some more wildflowers over here as well. So we do the same, here. And the other thing to notice is that I also left the grass a bit lighter near the base. So essentially, if you have a ground that is covered with grass, and then you want to also have some wildflowers, so try to leave that area where you want to have flowers a bit lighter. So don't make draw grass over there, because then you will be covering your ground with the wildflower. So that's what I did. I left this a bit wide, so my flowers they stand out a bit more. If I had covered this with grass, then it would be dark spot already, and then the flowers won't stand out that much. And again, always remember to ground your stem. And this is what I do, and a bit more flower here. So essentially, always try to give a bit of organic shape to the flowers. So don't add them just like in straight line or just like in loop like this, but something like like this shape or this shape. So this gives more natural feel for the flowers on the ground, right? So that's what I'm doing. So I'm giving a bit of shape like this, right? So, and what you can also do is simply add more lines at the bottom. So when you want to show that there are a lot of flowers, you don't really have space to draw flowers too much. So what you do is you simply draw a few flowers and then just indicate stems like this. So at the base we have a lot more stems than the flowers, but overall this is giving feel of dense area covered with ground flowers. So essentially over here as well, I can just simply add some stems. So at the ground level it appears highly dense, and even though not all the stem ends in a flower, it gives a feel for a dense flowery spot. So that's the trick essentially. Over here I have some flowers, and then I can add a bit more stem to make it give it a bit more dense feel for the flowers. So like this. So there we have it, right? And you can also then define a bit more grass at the base of this stem to ground them even further. So what I will do over here is just to simply add a small grass stroke over here to ground these flowers a bit more. So we use this wiggly line to ground the stem, which always works, but at the end what you can do is also add this small grassy stroke to ground these flower stems a bit more. So there we have it. So I just add some more of this bit of grass stroke, and that gives a bit more grounded appearance to these flowers and adds more interest to the drawing. And I can do the same over here. So there we have it. We just drew a very simple drawing. We have this old weathered wooden post, and then we have this young trees coming out behind them. And then we added some ground wildflowers to add interest to our drawing. So this is something very simple, something quickly that you can put together in under 30 minutes, and yeah, just enjoy doing it. Thanks. Bye bye.